So in one video, you're going to get two things. You're going to get an introduction to Cline. You're going to learn how to build out an entire web app. You're going to have a social system that allow you to put in your basic ideas and be able to publish them across multiple different platforms. And you're going to get a comparison to other tools and IDEs, so you can make a decision about, which one you want to use the most. So enough talk. Let's just jump straight in. So I've been meaning to give Cline a test. Everyone's been giving it a lot of credit recently. It's come out with a new autonomous agent, much like Cursor Composer and Windsurf in the last couple of weeks, which looks really interesting. And I really like the fact that it's an extension baked into VS Code. So I'm in VS Code right now. I need to go to extensions, and then I'm going to type in Cline. And then this looks like the right one here. Okay, so it looks like we're installed. We have our little icon over here for Cline. Okay, so to get started, needs an API provider for Claude 3.5 Sonnet. So apparently you can use OpenRouter or any of these other different options, even using Ollama. I have an Anthropic subscription, so I'm just going to go straight there and paste in my API key. So to get your Anthropic API key, just go to console.anthropic.com/dashboard, click over here, and then you'll get the API keys in, sorry, my head is hiding it, API keys just here. Just a quick note on using your voice to prompt. I'm a big fan of this. I think it moves a lot faster and it's good to get practiced in this style of interaction with computers. I think it's the way things are going. So on Windows, you can turn on accessibility, speech. There's two different options. There's voice access, which gives you this bar across the top of the screen. I'm not a big fan of it. It's kind of clunky at the moment. I'm waiting for it to be improved upon. The old school one is just voice typing. You hit the Windows key and H and it pops up. And I'm just a bigger fan of that at the moment. There's something similar as well on Mac, and it's called Dictation. You can enable it in the same way. So I'm going to try and create an app that I've already built using Cursor as a direct comparison here, and let's see how it performs. So I'm going to hit my dictation key, Windows H. I want to build a web app using Next.js, Tailwind, ShadCN components, and it's going to be a web app that allows you to input content into a message box and then allows me to hit a generate button. And what it does then is it uses a collection of different prompts to generate either a LinkedIn post, a Twitter post, Blue Sky post, Threads post, based on specific system prompts that I've set up for each one of those social tools. Let's get started with that. What I want you to do is just give me the front end code at this time. I don't want to set up a database or any kind of back end. Let's just use dummy JSON as a test base. I'll also want a settings section where I can change the specific prompts and system prompts for each one of the platforms that I add. Maybe I want to change my tone of voice, etc. So let's go. Okay, so that's the kind of prompt I would typically use with Windsurf or Cursor. I don't know what to expect, but let's see how we get on. So I really like here that we're seeing the tokens and the API cost in real time. So let me just minimize this. Okay, so first we need to create a new Next.js project with Tailwind CS and ShadCN. Perfect. The app will need a main content input. Great. So I think the kind of language and text that they're using here is quite familiar because it's using Claude Sonnet. Claude Sonnet is what I would use with the other tools as well. It's just the best at coding. So this already feels quite familiar. TypeScript, Tailwind, ESLint. Okay, cool. Let's just run the command. This is cool. It's popped open the terminal. Great. And it's asking me, do I want to go to the source directory? Yes. App router, yes. TurboPack, no. Import alias, no. So what I like here already is that it's opening the native terminal that I would normally interact with to run these codes. In Cursor, what happens is it spins up a kind of a pseudo terminal, one that I can pop out and interact with. It's much prefer that it's happening in the default terminal, if that's what you want to call it. Now that we have our Next.js project set up, let's install ShadCN UI components. We'll need to navigate into the project directory and set up ShadCN UI. If you're into developing apps with AI, I'd encourage you to check out switchdimension.com. And on that, I've got a course called Developing with Cursor. And whether it's Cline or Cursor or Windsurf, the fundamentals I'm going to be teaching there work across any code-based IDE. They're all pretty similar at this stage. So I'll teach you, what frameworks to use, how to build up an app, and how to get one into production, including payment processing and everything else. And that's coming soon. So if you want to get involved, just go to switchdimension.com, jump into the waitlist, and there's preferred pricing for anybody who wants to get stuck in as an early user. So this is a gotcha that's coming from Claude that I've seen already in Cursor. The current version of ShadCN is not installed with ShadCN-UI. It's ShadCN at latest. But I'm actually going to let that run and just see how it's handled by Cline here as an error. So let's go and see what happens. Okay, so it's actually gone and caught the error on the install, which is great. Now, the problem here is it's just caught itself in a loop. It's gone back to repeat the same command as it did before. It didn't really catch the error. So I'm just going to let it know. Okay, so I'm just going to use this little command here to let it know that. So I'm also going to try this experiment where I paste it into the custom instructions here. I'm going to say you should use ShadCN at latest instead of ShadCN UI. For ShadCN components, and I'm going to try and get it to tell me when it is using that rule. I want to see how it's using the context. So I'm just going to click done here to save. Now let's just go back and run the command here. Or no, sorry, we're going to feed the message back in first. Okay, so let's run that command. Perfect, it's working now. So I can just work within the terminal, New York, neutral, CS variables. Yep. Okay, yeah, that's fine. And now it's installing the dependencies. And sorry, just a note on why I'm getting it to work solely on the front end as a starting point. I'm unsure of what my app is going to look like. I'd like to kind of flesh out how the interface works first with some dummy data. And then once I know that, I can go and start to apply the back end. It just feels much more natural to me to design out the interface, think about how it's going to work, and then actually apply the database, the backend, structures, etc. Otherwise, what's happening is I'm constantly getting the model to make migrations to the database to change them, etc. So it just saves on some over and back. Okay, perfect. So now that we've initialized, let's install the components, text area. Cline wants to execute this command, cdn. Okay. Okay, cool. So we've jumped into creating the interface already. Now let's create the main page component with our UI. We'll need to create new page component. Platform selector. Awesome. So again, very similar to Cursor in that it's giving us a difference file or a diff file view. So everything that's in red is what is being removed and everything in green is what's being added. So it's editing the main page of the Next.js app that we've set up. Okay, cool. So it's already picked up on an error here. I noticed there's issues with the import paths in the page. Let me fix the imports. That's cool. So it's actually testing for errors and able to respond. That's cool. Okay, this is looking quite promising. For 30 cents in credits, we've already generated a working interface, and this is kind of exactly what I needed, if not a little bit better. So we've got a place where we can enter our content. I can brain dump my ideas about a post that I want to make, and then I can select what platform that I want to push that out on. Select my tone. This is not something I asked for, but it obviously was created based on what the model thought was appropriate. Then I can hit generate, and nothing is happening right now. Sorry, I'll select my tone, generate. So nothing really connected there yet. And then in my settings page, I've got each one of the platforms, and then a system prompt that will go with that, and you know, the length maybe limits on those particular platforms. Okay, so that's pretty good for 30 cents worth of credits. Let's jump back into the tool again. So basically it's gone and said Cline wants to execute this command. I did execute that command. It is running, and now I've got this. So I'm assuming that means proceed while the development server is running. I don't know. I'm going to hit go. Okay, so this is pretty cool. Now it's actually using Claude's computer use to see if everything is running okay. So I'm going to approve this, so I can actually see it interacting in the terminal here. Okay, it's going faster than I can keep up with here. So it's basically loaded the page. See, the application is loading, but the styling isn't being applied correctly. Update the global CSS file to include the Tailwind and ShadCN styles. So just a note, at this point in the project, I encounter an error on import paths, which goes round several times over and back. I end up spending a couple of dollars in credit trying to solve the problem. And it turns out it's just how I set up the project initially. When I actually started the folder, I had a raw folder ready for the project to be installed in. What I should have done is actually use the install within this folder command when setting up Next.js, and that's by using a little dot to indicate that it should be in this folder. So typically when you set up the project yourself, go and run an Next.js initialization command, and then start to work within the root folder and set everything from there. That seemed to be important for how Cline interacts with the file base. So I'm going to skip past all of that and jump forward so I don't bore you. Okay, so I seem to have hit a rate limit on my organization. So I'm going to have to go back over and change that rate limit. So it seems like my rate limit is set on my current tier. If I actually want to upgrade it, I need to contact sales. So even if I want to add in more credits or up this rate, it feels like it's hard set at the moment. Let me know in the comments if I'm wrong on this or you've seen something. Okay, so I'm going to give OpenRouter a go in terms of using it as an API for Claude Sonnet. I had actually a subscription to Sonnet, but it seems to be catching me out on a rate limit of 40,000 tokens for what I want to be able to put through. Now, again, this isn't a problem with Cursor. You pay $20 a month, and I've never run into any kind of barriers in terms of requests. Credit limit, once the credits are consumed, let's just put a cap of $20 here for now. VS Code again, we're going to switch it to OpenRouter, drop in our API key, and hit done. Okay, and let's see if we can retry on that. More credits are required. Okay, yeah, we need to buy some credits. So go to credits, and we're going to add credits here. And I'm going to use a couple of 100,000 of my Bitcoin here to pay for this. So that seems to have worked fine. So I'm actually going to bounce all the way back to the start. If you think about it, all the progress we made was pretty much straight away, and we spent very little money. So let's just go back and try the checkpoint system. So I'm going to hit restore the task and the workspace. Okay, so it's taking us right back there. Oh, we've got multiple options here. Restores the task and your project's files back to a snapshot taken at that point. So this is very similar to the cursor checkpoint system. You can just actually go back to a previous snapshot. Let's see how we go. Okay, cool. We're back to where we started. So it's asking me if I want to read. Okay, I'm actually going to move into auto approve mode. So I'm going to allow it to read files and directories. I'm going to allow it to edit files. I'm not going to allow it to edit commands because those are infrequent and I'd like to see what it's doing. I'd like it to be able to use the browser and definitely allow it to use MCP servers. So MCP servers are new from Anthropic. Well, they're a couple of months old, but they're actually really interesting. But I'm going to talk about that in a second. So this is, you know, a decidedly different workflow. It's much more hands-off than Cursor in the sense that it's attempting to use Anthropic's computer use model to actually test out what it's implemented. So it's basically opening a browser itself and working its way through the interface to test, seeing if there's errors. It has access to console logs and then coming back and seeing if it can fix those in real time. So that's a big advantage. I'm not sure how often it's going to work well and if it can lead to issues because the computer use model isn't super accurate. So it might go and imagine it has some problems and then go into a loop of trying to fix those problems that don't necessarily need to be solved, costing you, you know, credits and big file changes that aren't necessary. But it is an interesting approach that I'm really interested in digging deeper into. Okay, so it's continuing to cycle through. So I'm feeling pretty redundant here. I'm just going to go and top up my tea, come back and see how it's gotten on. Okay, back again. I actually went for a walk. It is freezing out there. Oh. Okay, so how did we get on? Oh, and I'm just noticing it's gone and spent a whole $1 on me since I've been gone. Okay, so again, it just went around in the same loop, but thankfully, since I was away, it did have an API request limit set to 20 because I don't want it to continually try and fix that import path issue. So it seems to be working fine for me as far as I can see. So let's take it a little bit deeper and see how it'll work in terms of working with a database. Okay, now I actually want to get proper AI completions. What are your suggestions for how we would do this? So let's see what it's decided to do here. Okay, let me analyze what we need to do. Add AI completions to the social content generator. Check the current state of the project. We'll need to integrate with an AI API, likely OpenAI for completions. We'll need to create components and functionality to handle the AI interaction. So it wants to execute the command and I'm going to let it execute the command. Cool. It seems to be working its way through all these problems. I just love seeing that all these problems appear and then they disappear again so easily. At least I think so. In terms of an interface or a user interface, I'm actually pretty impressed by how clean and straightforward Cline is so far. That's one thing Cursor kind of suffers from. It doesn't have the cleanest and most straightforward interface. It's fairly Spartan. Okay, so it looks like I just need to replace the API key in the .env. So I'm going to go to OpenAI and get my API key. So I went to platform OpenAI. I got my API key and I put it into my .env file. So let's see how we go. I'm going to click see new changes here. See what that gets me. I haven't seen this button before. Okay, so let's run this and let's click generate and cross our fingers. Sweet. So it works. Okay, so I've got my social post generator working across being able to post to various different platforms. And then I've got my settings where I can change the system prompts, which is pretty cool. Let's see how Cline handles adding in a database. So one thing I figured out actually in the meantime, so that I can see the file structure alongside seeing Cline, is if I click this button up here, I tried dragging Cline over here into this box, but it doesn't seem to, oh, it's working now. It didn't work before. This is how I'm used to using AI, so I'm going to leave it here and see how it works. So I could add in like Supabase or Firebase or Mongo or something like that, but I just want to keep this nice and light. And we're going to use SQLite as a database, and we're going to use something like Prisma as an ORM or an object relational model tool. And the reason I like to use things like Prisma is it has all your schema, your migrations, and exactly how you've built the database and what the schema of the database is, so that your AI model can parse and understand that as part of its context and makes decisions in that way. So it's good to actually have an ORM if you can. Okay, that's great. So now what I want to do is add some persistent storage. I want to be able to store all of the generations into a database. And I'd like to use SQLite in this case. And I'd like to use the Prisma ORM to manage all of that. And as well as that, let's update the interface so that we can see a history of the prompts that I've put in and the generations. So maybe let's create a sidebar using ShadCN components on the left-hand side of the interface, and then show all the previous chat generations so that I can click and see what was previously created. Thanks. Okay, so we've got auto approve set up. Let's just run this, see how we get on. Fingers crossed. Okay, instantly we've got an error. Okay, so now after a restart, we seem to have some success. It cost me 5 cents. Okay, so let's break down this task, set up Prisma, add CN for the sidebar. Okay, cool. So let's run that command. Now, bearing in mind, if I gave it access to run those commands itself, it might move a whole lot faster. But at this stage, I just want to understand a little bit more about how this IDE, or sorry, how this extension Cline works. So we could end up having a much smoother process if I just trust it and enable that. Okay, so Prisma is installed. Let's initialize it and create our database schema. Okay, this is awesome. So it's overwritten my API key there. That's fine for now. Let's just run with what's happening here. So it wants to run the Prisma migration. So that's basically, it's created, I presume, the schema here, and it's running the migration so that this schema that it's come up with to store the generations is going to be migrated to SQLite. And now it wants to execute this command. It's fixed all the type errors, which I absolutely love. I mean, I get the point of TypeScript, but oh my God, trying to make your way through and apply types is just not my idea of fun. npm run dev. Okay, so we're just going to test the content. Now I've updated the OpenAI API key in the .env file, which had been overwritten. So it looks like it's working. Yeah, okay. And we've got our post. Now, if we check our history, does that work? No, we're getting two different errors here. So these are our errors. We can just copy those. And then let's go back in here and let's just check out if I can actually add the problem by using this context and then paste that in. Okay, so it probably would have actually gone and fixed this itself. If I let it use browser mode, it would be able to check the console, test content, and generate. Let's go for Instagram this time and generate. Cool. Hello, InstaFam. Well, that's cliched anyway. Okay, sweet, that worked really well. And let's check if we have the database working and connected via Prisma and SQLite. Awesome, we have our past content and history store there. Cool, so all in all, super job from Cline. I'm impressed. Pro number one, it's, you know, back inside in VS Code, you've got everything native to VS Code, you've got all the extensions, etc. I know there will be problems down the line for Cursor, which is a fork of VS Code, having access to the extensions that VS Code provides. They'll have to use, you know, variations or the open standards of those, which might be a little bit limited at the start. Not a big deal, but these are little things. And I also really do see that VS Code in the long run is probably going to win out with this battle. They have the luxury of having a huge market share. They can watch as companies like Codium, Windsurf, Cursor AI, and even extensions like Cline really develop out the interface and what it means to be a great AI product on their behalf. And then they can just swoop in after the fact and apply all these things natively, and perhaps even go deeper into the VS Code system itself to make sure that it's leveraging everything natively, not through some API, but, you know, directly within the code base. So I think long-term VS Code is going to win this out. So I also really like the ability to use the browser tool, the ability to open up a browser to see and test if anything goes wrong. It's actually looking at the console for errors, and then it's taking those errors, understanding them, and then applying them to fixes in the app. And if you click this auto approve button, it's going to step through that process itself. Having used computer use, you know, it goes wrong more than it goes right on a lot of different tasks. So what you need to be careful of there is that it doesn't see some phantom problem or diagnose or triage a problem incorrectly and go into a loop of trying to fix that and costing you a lot of money. In the example where, you know, I went to take a break and let it run and it clocked up $1. Now it stopped at, you know, 20 iterations because I'd set that limit. But, you know, what if I'd left it alone for a lot longer, hadn't got a limit in place, didn't have a cap on my account? It could run up a lot of changes and change the code base in a big way. Maybe even my file system, if I'd let it have that level of access. Now, of course, I can use checkpoints and I can go back in time to, or snapshots as they call them in Cline. I can go back in time and revert all those issues. But yeah, I think that's very much, it's a really interesting tool. I think it probably is the future. But how useful it is in the short term, we've yet to see. The next thing I'm really interested about is its usage of the MCP servers, which are offered by Claude. So again, MCP is basically like a glorified massive tool system that Anthropic is building up. So it's the ability to connect to multiple different systems, to GitHub, or kind of think of it as APIs and tools, so that there's a set structure and a set way to interact with your tool. You build a server around that, and now an agent can access that, use that, and then perform next actions or whatever it needs to do. So the fact that Cline is thinking about that and is building that in is really cool, but I'll have to dig deeper into how that works. Hopefully that was helpful. I had a lot of fun playing with Cline. Thank you so much for your time, and see you in the next one.